Good morning, it's Bill Fitzgerald with another edition of FSOT Prep. This one is going to focus on the situational judgment portion of the FSOT. I feel for you, I really do. I've just recently gotten my head wrapped around the situational judgment test. I don't think the State Department has done you any great favors. There's very little information on how to go about answering the questions, although in the 2017 version of how to become a Foreign Service officer, they did include the answers, at least in the 2017, but they didn't provide the answers in the 2018. I'll have those in the show notes. The questions haven't changed from 2017 to 2018. But I can give you the answers in case you ran into that problem. In any case, I do want to talk about the situational judgment test because out of the three sections of the test, the situational judgment test is the only one that makes you, in my mind, makes you have to become a Foreign Service officer. In other words, to answer these questions, you really have to treat them as though a Foreign Service officer would treat them. Whether it's fair, I don't know. A lot of these are based on institutional understanding, you understanding the State Department and how a Foreign Service officer works and how a Foreign Service officer acts in the department or overseas. And most of you will be going, when you get into the Foreign Service, will be traveling overseas almost immediately. In any case, let's get down to a situational judgment test. There are 28 scenarios, and you have 42 minutes to complete it. Again, the different part is that you really have to think like a Foreign Service officer to do well on this portion of the test. First things first, you have to read the scenarios and understand them, and to read the questions and weigh them. But really what you're looking for when you read the scenario is to find the problem. There will always be a problem in a situational judgment test, obviously. I mean, they're trying to get you to show that you have the judgment to how you judge a situation, how you solve a problem. And how would a Foreign Service officer solve a problem? I included in some slides that I drew up. One is the decision criteria for tenure and promotion in the Foreign Service. I've given you an edited version of that, of the high points and the important points that I think you need to see. Now, if you can download it from the careers.state.gov, and then I would say, look to the left. You don't need to trouble yourself with the mid-level or the senior level questions, but you do, or a decision for the criteria for tenure and promotion, but you do need to look at the entry-level officer portion. And you'll see that they talk about leadership skills, decision-making and judgment, key to any sort of resolution of a problem. Team building, that's to be inclusive. On one of the practice tests, I think it's in a public affairs section somewhere where you've heard from the finance people that they're going to have to restrict the amount of money you get. So instead of 8 programs, you're going to have 6 programs. All I can tell you is the answer to that is fairly straightforward. You as the American can, go into your office by yourself and prioritize and think about that way. Or equally bad, you can take all the Americans into your office and have a powwow about how you're going to prioritize the events. Or, as you should, include the Foreign Service nationals, the locally employed staff, who probably many of them have been working for the U.S. government in the public affairs section for 20, 30 years even. and have no doubt seen this sort of, tightening of budgets and how the section has coped over the years. It's not to say that you necessarily have to accept their recommendation, but if you're going to be team building, you have to be inclusive. You have to include those folks, and they have, superb knowledge about whether you want to, in fact, prioritize or whether you want to squeeze the other 6 programs and get some money for the final 2, so you could actually run all 8 programs, but you're not going to be able to, but each one is going to be a little bit less than what it was. Now, the FSNs have gone through this before, and so to build your team in that section, include the FSNs. They'll tell you what works, what doesn't work, how much money things, how you can cut a budget, that sort of thing. So be as inclusive as possible. Customer service. We all join for public service, or at least that's part of our decision to become foreign service officers. And customer service is very similar to public service. And the customers are not so clear to you as a foreign service officer, or at least not on your first tour. But customers include, obviously, American citizens who get passports and certificates of birth and other assorted documents, can get voting absentee ballots or how to go about filing for an absentee ballot. And frankly, visa applicants are customers as well. And all deserve you leaning forward to help them, putting your best foot forward with them, being courteous, kind, understanding. That goes for visa applicants as well, absolutely. I mean, you may not get more than a minute or 2 to say no to them, but you can do so in a courteous way. I've been there, and you will be on the visa line at some point in your career early on if you're a political officer or economic or other types of officers, but you will work on the visa line. And, occasionally you'll get visa applicants who don't like the answer that you give them. They call you names, things like that. But you should always remain professional, remain courteous, and you repeat your answer, no, and then you step away if you think you're going to say something bad. Take a couple of deep breaths. We've all been there. Maybe late in the day and you're tired of getting yelled at all day. You turn around, you walk away from the visa window, take a couple of deep breaths, maybe joke a little with your FSNs or your American colleagues who are not in the windows, and then you go back and continue. All these folks are customers. Visa applicants themselves pay more than $100 to get a visa interview with you, the Foreign Service Officer. In any case, some of the other decision criteria are really important to understand the best way to solve these situational judgment scenarios. Interpersonal skills, persuasion and negotiation, workplace perceptiveness. So you understand what's going on. More often than not, in a typical visa section, let's use the practice test question about the woman, I believe it's a woman or a guy who's working next to another guy who's shouting, who's talking so loudly, he or she can't think about what's going on. You can't even understand what their applicant is trying to say. Now, there are a couple of options in the answers. One is that she or he should go back and yell as loud as the other guy so they can do their visa interviews. Well, that's frankly unprofessional. It's immature and it's just so passive aggressive. It's unacceptable. But at the same time, you don't go to your boss straight away either and complain that Tom is yelling in the visa interview window and you can't think. No, in fact, you never go to your boss first off. It's very rare that you would go to your boss to help solve your problem. You're a Foreign Service Officer and you should be able to solve your own problems. In this case, I think the best answer is to buttonhole Tom. your fellow workmate and ask and tell him the problem. Tell him that he's talking so loudly, you can't complete your visa interviews. More often than not, rather than being defensive or attack you, Tom's going to say something like, well, I'm kind of hard of hearing, and I think the microphones and the speakers in my booth aren't working as well as maybe they should be. Well, then it's a quick trip up to the GSO to get him to either repair or replace those microphones and speakers so Tom can do it and lower his voice. It seems straightforward, but it seems straightforward and a decent way to do things. And that's why as a Foreign Service officer, you should talk. You need to persuade, you need to understand. Active listening is also a big part of this. Adaptability, to figure out the best way that you and Tom can solve this problem. On here, one of the decision criterion is institutional knowledge, and that's where I think the State Department's not treating you fairly. How are you, as an applicant, supposed to know the institutional, they call it institutional knowledge, the hierarchy of the State Department? Frankly, all the stuff they've put out, you really don't get a good grasp of that until you reach A100, when everyone talks you honestly to you, not in the glossy recruiting guides. They don't tell you what's really going on. There's a hierarchy in the Foreign Service. My first boss, probably my best boss, told me in my first days, remember, the only difference between the Foreign Service and the military is that the military guys wear uniforms. And it's true. The State Department is a very, very hierarchical organization. So in telling you this, you never go around your boss. You never send something back to the department that somebody has graded or marked up with a red pen without making those changes, or at least approaching the person who wrote up those changes, who you marked up your errors on your draft cable, and ask him why. I'm just trying to get, and you as a first tour officer, you're just trying to get a handle on the State Department style and writing. It's a fair question, and he or she is very likely to be happy to tell you, to explain things. Now, there is one officer who, well, let me just say this first. If you were to go around your bosses and send that cable ignoring the changes on it, you would be in deep trouble. It's very rare for people not to make tenure, to be honest with you. If your boss holds on to that, it could hurt you. It's typically automatic promotions from FS6 by time. So if you're an FS6 when you come in, the next year you'll be an FS5, and the following year you'll be an FS4. And then it's same with tenure. Once you get tenured, and it's fewer than, I'd say less than 5% don't get tenure. But going back to the department without understanding and making the changes that your boss has suggested would be grounds for you to be given a poor employee evaluation report and would delay your tenure most likely. What I found, my understanding of situational judgment, it's easier to find the right answer than it is to find the worst answer. You have to answer both sides of this, and that makes it more difficult. If you were to only have to answer the correct answer and ignore the worst answer, it'd be a lot easier of a test. But in fact, I think it's more difficult because you have to identify the best answer and the worst answer. But you can do it. I have some tips for you too that I want to bring up. And you'll see on the slides. The best courses of action are action, engaging with the other person, contact, understanding the problem. one-on-one communication if you have a problem with somebody. Inclusive action. Bring in all the FSNs. Bring in everyone on your staff to brainstorm on a problem. And go the extra mile for your customers, visa applicants and American citizens, who are typically the visa applicants, the customers you will see on your first tour. The worst thing to do is accepting the status quo. There's another practice question about somebody, probably an assistant GSO, and you are going through and hoping to negotiate new leases. But you find that the assistant GSO has already identified a landlord that he has worked with before and likes. He gives good rates, he doesn't complain, he makes repairs in a timely fashion. But that's not the way it works, and you know that. So you need 3 bids for every apartment or house you're going to rent for a Foreign Service officer or other officers at the embassy. So really what you have to do is you don't go to your boss right away. Remember, no going to the boss right away. You talk to the fellow you're working with, the assistant GSO. Let's call him Gene. Gene, I'm not comfortable with this. This is all the perceptions of an unethical practice. You're breaking the rules in the FAM that we need 3 bids to be able to make it fair and transparent. Now, Gene could very well be a second tour officer, and he may first get very defensive and say, you don't know what you're talking about, you've only been in the Foreign Service, this is your first tour, why don't you just shut up and listen to what I think? And you say, well, I could do that, Gene, but then I'd be complicit in what I would think. I'm very uncomfortable with this practice. It's an unethical practice. We're breaking the rules. Now, I have a feeling the assistant GSO is going to back off at that point and agree that you need to interview 3 people and weigh price, service requirements, size of the apartment or the house, things like that. Whether he's willing to make repairs at the front part of the contract, front part of the lease. However, if the assistant GSO says, screw you, I'm doing it my way, well, then you need to buttonhole him and make a meeting with the supervisory GSO and explain that you are uncomfortable. But make sure the assistant GSO is in there so he can defend himself. You say to the supervisory GSO, I'm really uncomfortable with this because we're not interviewing 3 people, we're interviewing 1 person who my colleague has identified as the best landlord there. And I don't know how he identified him as the best landlord there. So that's a time when you go to your boss, but you always go to your boss after you've exhausted your one-on-one conversation with the person you have a problem with. Another worst answer is going to your boss for resolution immediately. You don't do that. And run to the department. Definitely don't do that. Acting unprofessional, immature, gossipy, passive aggressive. If the man or the woman in the visa booth scenario were to, ask somebody else, ask another colleague to intervene with Tom on the visa line, that's just unprofessional. It's the same as if she starts gossiping about Tom that Tom talks too loud. When in fact it could very well be something that Tom is slightly deaf, doesn't need a hearing aid, but he needs a better speaker and a better microphone. That's how you approach the situational judgment, is how you're going to get resolution, how you're going to resolve it in the best way, and how to resolve it in the worst way, in which case you probably don't resolve the problem, but it continues going on. Again, I may be repetitious, but I want you to see this slide as well. The correct or incorrect answers, you want for the correct answer, you want to figure out how you can fix the problem. You want to bring together, be it one person or be it two or three in your group, bring everyone together to resolve the issues. Never ignore a problem. Be proactive, communicative, and inclusive. And you are the public servant, and therefore you are in charge of customer service. The wrong answers, of course, are don't agree or ignore unethical or especially illegal situations, because you become complicit if you ignore them or agree with them. Avoid going to your boss to handle a problem immediately. That's just not done. And don't forget the hierarchy. That is, you never go over your supervisor's head and never go directly to Washington without your boss or the front office approving of a cable, of a telephone call, or whatever, an email even, that you're going to make back to the department. The important thing, too, is as junior officers, as entry-level personnel, you have a special relationship with the DCM, who's the number 2 in an embassy, in every embassy around the world. And the DCM is charged in every embassy to have a mentoring relationship with the entry-level officers. Now, in a big post, you're probably all meeting together around a table, and he's or she is fielding questions about foreign service, about what's the right way, what's the wrong way, the sort of stuff that you would do in any new organization that you join. And the DCM, if he or she is worth his salt, is also asking you about what section you're working in, how's it going, what's the morale like. He's trying to gauge through you what your perception is of what's going on in the section you're working in. Because the DCM, the Deputy Chief of Mission, is the Chief Operating Officer. He's in charge basically of the day-to-day operations of the embassy. If he wants to know if there are morale problems brewing, he wants to know if morale has gone way up and then suddenly nosedive, and he wants to be able to be in a position to sort that out. Now, just because you have a special relationship, and a small post too, it's the same thing, except you'd probably be meeting with the DCM one-on-one. But that you have a special relationship with the DCM does not mean that you go over your boss to ask the DCM a question. It's especially a work-related question. You should be going to your boss. Now, I've had plenty of bosses I didn't like, but I understood the hierarchy, and I'd always go to my boss, whoever it was, and say, should I do this? Can I do this? And how would you go about doing it if you were in my shoes? And then when I was in ELO, actually they didn't have the DCM thing, but we had a decent DCM in Ecuador. Actually, a better DCM in Lusaka, my next post. And I'd approach him, also because it was such a small embassy, who was my boss. But I'd wait until, we had our one-on-one meetings, and we discussed what the problems were, what I needed to do. Can I go straight back to the department on this? Are you okay with that? That sort of thing. Again, situational judgment test. We haven't seen them much in the United States. I understand they're included on the FBI agent test, but I see them more as a UK phenomenon. I think they're on the civil service exam in the UK and also in other European countries. I will include in the show notes the URLs for some of those sites that offer practice tests, mostly in the UK. Focus on the customer service ones, because those are the ones that are going to be most germane to foreign service officers. You may look at the management ones. They may or may not be germane. I'm not sure. I looked at some. The management sort of seems strange to me, but nevertheless, you have an option of looking at those. These slides I'll post again on my website, which is foreignserviceexam.org, foreignserviceexam.org. That'll be in the show notes, of course. If you have any comments about this video, or if you'd like to see other videos in the future, leave me a comment down below. If you have friends who might profit from this, pass it along to them. And please do subscribe if you find these videos are worthwhile to you. Okay, that's it for now. Good luck on the test. Bye.